You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. What are we talking about today? We're going back to Portland because Portland continually just has the best stuff for us to talk about. All right. So we know about the gun. The gun violence in Portland is just off the hook. They are just running around shooting each other. But Portland refuses to recognize, hey, maybe we should get some more police officers. No, we don't want to do that. We want to reimagine and rethink a bunch of other stuff that may or may not work. But in the meantime, Portland's in a war zone. Here's their latest concept. And here's the quote. Here's the headline. And thank you for you who sent it to me. You know who you are. Much appreciated. 2 thumbs up. Longtime Portland park ranger. This is what this guy is saying. This is a former cop who's a park ranger. This is his quote. "We are not the police of the parks, period. Full stop." Right? And we're not going to be, period. Full stop. They want the cops. They want the park rangers, Yogi Bear and the park ranger. They want those guys who are unarmed and untrained to go take care of some of this violence going on. We need you guys to step up your game in the parks, even though majority of crimes don't happen in the parks. This is what Portland's trying to do. What can we do that will look like we're trying to do something? We'll take some credit for it. And hopefully gun violence and violence in general here in Portland will decrease, even though none of this stuff happens in the parks. It was kind of like Bruce Springsteen got a DUI in a federal park for like downing a couple of drinks and driving off, whatever. But it was because it was in a park, and you're like, oh, that's not good. Parks are, a lot of times they're federal. You got state and you got city and you got federal. Got to be careful because the laws in one don't necessarily apply to the other. This is what we are reading today. This is what we're talking about. If you're new here, thanks for joining. Much appreciated. My name is Sean Reynolds. I own a couple of real estate companies, but I talk about news that you want to hear that you're not going to see elsewhere. Why? Because it doesn't fit the major media narrative. We don't want to talk about this. We don't want to talk about the violence in Portland because, geez, it's bad. Well, what are we doing? Oh, we can't fund the police. We just went through that whole defund the police thing. That hasn't been working out well, but don't say it out loud. I do, because it's reasonable to understand that if you have fewer cops on the street, your streets aren't going to be safer. They're going to be less safe. All right, let's jump on in. Enough of my intro, enough of my annoying intro. Let's go. A proposal to hire more park rangers, Yogi Bear and the park ranger. Proposal to hire more park rangers to help stem Portland's dramatic rise of shootings. Does this make any sense at all in the first sentence? Does this make one iota of sense? No, it doesn't. Park ranger. So that we want to stop rise of shootings and gun deaths by hiring some more park rangers. And this is over the last year. This stunned one of Portland's longest serving park rangers, Dave Barrios, who has worked as a ranger for 15 years after 30 years as a police officer. So he retired and he's like, I don't want to be at home all the time. I need a job. I kind of like to keep busy. I'm going to go become a park ranger. So he's got 45 years in. So, but after 30 years as a police officer, he said he knew nothing about the proposal by 3 Portland commissioners, right? They didn't come to him, he said, but if they had, he would have told them that the approach is risky and impractical. It's a no-go, folks. You need to reimagine and rethink something else. Some of these stories, I mean, when I read them, I'm just like, okay, I'm going to read that on the podcast, but are people really going to believe me that this is a legit story? Do you guys believe this is going on? To me, so much of what I read, I think in the back of my head, I've been reading the newspaper since probably middle school. We used to get the morning newspaper and I would read it from front to back because I'm just kind of a news junkie. I want to know all the ridiculous details about what's going on out there that have nothing to do with my life. But every now and then I bring them up in a situation and people are like, what are you talking about? And then I'll just keep talking about my story like I do in the podcast here. So my life really hasn't changed much. It's just that I get paid now to read the news, which is weird in and of itself. Park rangers aren't certified as law enforcement officers, and not all receive the same training, Barrios said, because they're walking around parks, which don't typically have. If you're going to do some criming, you're not going to go to a park with like a, one of those rudimentary restrooms with a pit toilet, a bunch of trees, and a bunch of picnic tables, right? That's what I picture when I think of like, a state park. Maybe it's got some camping areas. Maybe you've got a fire pit. You're not going to do a lot of criming there, are you? I mean, you're just not. It's not. People don't bring a lot of valuable stuff to the state park when they go camping there. So crimes don't really happen in parks. And as a result, rangers aren't, there to deal with the violence that Portland's got going on. And yet for some reason, let's make the park rangers responsible for a reduction in police violence, or a reduction in just violence. And while they wear a uniform, the park rangers, and carry radios, and get this, pepper spray. What about bear spray? Do they not carry bear spray? They have less authority than a parking patrol attendant. Good to know, he said. We are not the police of the parks, period, and we're not going to be, period, Barrios said. It's not something that the rangers themselves want. It's not their gig. It's not what they signed up for. The draft proposal, part of a $4.9 million gun violence package floated by 3 commissioners, has drawn immediate questions about its effectiveness and safety. It's kind of like taking out the police officers and replacing them with social workers on the front lines to handle all those 911 calls. Now, not all of them, but hey, and I've made so many examples of, okay, this news story happened. What would happen if you replace that cop or 2 or 3 cops responding to that and replace them with, call it a 50-year-old, middle-aged, out of shape, probably overweight social worker? What would happen then? What would that look like when they roll up on the kind of violence that the cops do? How would that go down? I'm going to go out on a limb and say it wouldn't go down well for the social worker. And same thing here, an unarmed dude with pepper spray and some really good knowledge of the outdoor forests. I mean, this isn't your final defense line against the gun violence going on in Portland, right? But we're $4.9 million gun violence package floated. It is just crazy. Commissioners Carmen Rubio, Mingus Maps, that's an interesting name, and Dan Ryan called for spending $1.4 million in park levy money to hire 24 more seasonal rangers through December. This is a head scratcher. It's like, if you need them to patrol the parks, if you've got an uprising in park violence, by all means. I like parks. I've spent a lot of time in parks, going mountaineering, going camping, all that good stuff. It's fun. Pacific Northwest. You try and get out during those 3 days of the summer where it's warm and go camping. Maybe a long weekend, maybe Memorial Day weekend. You just go out and go camping because it's epic here. Plus, you can go outside where most of the year, the other 364 days of the year, it's rainy or gloomy. And so hanging out in the parks, that's something. But this proposal, questionable at best, right? That would boost the seasonal ranks to 37 park rangers, in addition to another 24 rangers who work year-round. They also want to create a ranger engagement team to respond the day after a shooting in or near a park to support visitors. Why can't we use this money to hire more cops to make the streets where the actual violence is going on more safe? I don't know. I'm just a real estate guy that reads the news. Crazy. Their plan pointedly doesn't include any money for the police bureau to help bring back a uniformed patrol team with added community oversight, focusing on enforcing gun laws as the mayor and a group of community leaders want. That's what we need. We need some more cops in Portland. That's kind of the bottom line, right? But nobody wants to say that because it's not popular to say anything where you're talking about adding police to the streets. People are like, no, we want to defund them. No, we know that when we had higher numbers of police officers, our cities were more safe. But this is not a popular opinion, and we want to defund the police and try and go down these other routes. Meanwhile, gun violence here is just, it is one of those straight up escalation, gun violence and homicide in Portland. Record levels, right? So maybe there's a little cause and effect in there. I don't really know. My sociology is a little bit weak. One of my sons actually has a degree in sociology, and we would probably both agree this is a terrible idea. The city council last summer eliminated the gun violence reduction team, citing its disproportionate stops of people of color, and yet did much to quell violence. Okay. So far this year, at least 266 shootings have occurred throughout the city, including 81 that resulted in injuries. Police said guns have caused 18 of the city's 25 homicides since January 1. At that rate, Portland would finish the record with a year with a record 100 homicides. Not good. Not a good look. And guess how many of those are going to be solved? Probably not many, unless you've got a dude standing around with this proverbial smoking gun saying, I did it. Unless you got circumstances like that, Portland police are so few in numbers right now that they're going to be hard-pressed to come up with much. From July 1st through March 28th, relatively few of the shootings have occurred in parks. 26 out of 917 shootings. What percentage is that? Low. That's about 3%, according to police figures, 3%. And so we're spending millions on a proposal for 3% of shootings. And if you put more rangers in these parks for these situations, are they going to do anything? Like, you got an unarmed ranger coming at you and you're going to shoot another guy. Is that unarmed ranger, is he really going to interfere with your plans? Probably not. But nobody wants to talk about that. They just want to say, well, we did add $4 million to the park system. Parks and Recreation. That was a good show. Rob Lowe. He was very funny in that. And also you got a lot of actors in there that was just epic, right? That's a great show. I watched that all the way through. The commissioners realize rangers aren't sworn officers, but see them as just one part of the larger puzzle with expanded funding for community support services, said Rubio's spokesman, Will Howell. The idea is by being extra eyes in the park and being a constant presence, they'd be a calming influence as they have been for years, but with an increased capacity to handle the 3% of the shootings that occur in parks. This makes no sense. The other 97%, you could get some more cops on the street and handle that portion, but we're not doing that because we're defunding the police, and they're quitting in record numbers, right? Rubio also believes rangers could handle low-level incidents in parks to free up capacity for police to respond to more serious crimes, like the shootings that are occurring that we need more cops on the streets to be able to handle. She and other commissioners suggested the police bureau use savings from officer vacancies to pay for 6 additional detectives and a sergeant to investigate gun violence. No, you need more street cops out there. You need a heavier presence. We fully recognize there's a place for police in all of this. The question is whether there's a need for new resources. We think there's money that the police bureau already has. But we don't have the cops. You need more police. That's the bottom line here. That's the bottom line until somebody figures that out and goes, okay, the gig's up. We have reimagined and we have rethought till we are blue in the face. My mom used to always say that. Just blue in the face. Just blue. You've done that. You came up with the same solutions, which were just nut job like this one. Oh, let's get some more community involvement by being park rangers. Until somebody, stands up and goes, okay, I'm not the only one, but I think I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, if we hire some more cops, it might make our street safer. I don't know. Is this a legit proposal? Crazy, right? I mean, isn't it just wildly obvious? Instead, these cities, Seattle included, is going down all these other avenues that are going to do nothing. I mean, long-term community involvement, yep, great. No problem with that. You need that. But the bottom line is if you don't have enough cops on the street to keep it safe, it's not going to be safe. I mean, that's pretty simple, right? I mean, what am I missing? Am I missing anything? Let me know in the comments. Much of the savings from more than 90 police vacancies has been used to cover increased overtime costs stemming from police response to protests over the past year. All right, so that's where your money's going. And other bureau expenses, according to police and city budget analysts. Whenever I've been at a protest and I look at cops, I always think, oh my gosh, they must just be in their head going, I can't believe I signed up to babysit these people. Because these people just yell and they curse the police out and they're just super disrespectful. But they want to protest and they want to have their protest, whatever it is they're protesting, windmills in Alaska, I don't know, whatever they're protesting, they want to be respected for that, but they're not going to respect the police. I'm going to go on that. I'm a 2 thumbs down on that. That's a no-go for me. When the council made $15 million in police budget cuts last July, this is in the heat of the whole defund the police. Defund the police. This is a genius idea. We don't really know what we're going to do, but defund the police, that's your good start right there, because that is politically right now the hot potato. It's the hot button. That's what we're doing. So you had $15 million in police budget cuts last July that eliminated much of the vacancy cushion. And the police bureau had to find other ways to support its expenses, said Katie Shifley, a city budget analyst. While new vacancies have arisen over the course of the year, shocking, those savings are largely helping them to end the year on a balance rather than materializing as savings available for reallocation. All right, the Portland Parks and Recreation Bureau operates 146 neighborhood parks. Rangers patrol 7 days a week, including a night shift to cover the nearly 12,000 acres of land in the park system. So we're going to hire another, how many? Like 30? What did we say at the beginning? I didn't pay attention because right from the get-go, it was like, this isn't going to work. They are on regular assignment in Forest Park and Washington Park. They also patrol more than a dozen downtown area parks daily, typically the most visited. But all total have about 3% of the gun violence we're talking about. The other 97% on the streets in Portland. What are we doing there? Well, parks are okay. Rest of the area? Nutty. The Rangers are certified through the State Department of Public Safety Standards and Training as unarmed security providers. That's comforting when the other dude has a gun, right? They complete a 14-hour unarmed private security course, an exam on Oregon laws and rules, and are issued a certification good for 2 years, according to the state agency. They must complete a 4-hour refresher course and exam for recertification. Those are some of the least prerequisites for a job that has the sound of, I work for the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training. I work for that. I'm certified under them as an unarmed security provider. What do you have to do to get that? Not much. Portland Park Rangers use a combination of education and positive engagement and to reduce harm to park resources and the visitor experience, even though they have virtually zero training. They can eject people from parks or ban them. That's, hey, what are you going to do? I got a gun. I'm going to shoot you. I'm going to ban you. Depending on the circumstances, Ross said. In limited cases, some people can face civil penalties. Oh my gosh. Well, are you going to really shoot that guy? You might face some civil penalties. Make good choices, people. Rangers, seasonal ones, earning from $18.50 to $24 an hour, to full-time employees earning from $22.16 to $29.40 an hour, work with many organizations, including the Police Bureau, the Joint Office of Homeless Services, and Portland Street Medicine, Ross said. Training for Rangers include de-escalation and crisis interaction, first aid, defense tactics, and threat assessment, he said. But in all, they just don't get much training, do they? But Barrios described the training as spotty, with frequent turnover because of the seasonal nature of the jobs. He said it's been years since the Rangers received verbal communication training. Their role is that of an ambassador to make visitors feel comfortable and welcome, he said. They aren't set up to break up fights or wade into the middle of a disturbance, he said. You don't want to be approaching people with guns, Barrios said. That's inviting tragedy. It's not fair to the Rangers or to anybody else. When he was on the police force, Barrios spent 8 years building relationships with troubled youths on the street as a uniformed member of the gang enforcement team. All right, now we're getting somewhere, right? The job included approaching groups of young men hanging out in parks who were suspected of being armed and looking for trouble. That was risky even as an armed officer, Barrios said. He wouldn't do that as a park ranger, he said. Yep, 30 years, and I'm going to say, and 15 years as a ranger, 30 years as a cop, 15 years as a ranger. What they're proposing is a no-go. That's essentially what this guy is saying. Rangers are instructed not to get in the middle of disturbances, but to call police and instead be an effective witness, Barrios said. If people violate city code, drinking or urinating in a park, for instance, Rangers can work to exclude them. You are out of here. You are banned. But that's only if people volunteer their name and contact information, he said. So bottom line is park rangers have virtually no ability to do anything. Barrios said he believes the key in reducing shootings and killings is getting guns out of the hands of young people. The only way to do that is to have a uniformed patrol that's working with community leaders and working with street outreach, he said. I kind of think that you need to have some pretty hefty sentences so that people know they can't run around and shoot each other and basically they may or may not be prosecuted. I think people need to have a greater understanding that if they shoot somebody or they're involved with gun violence, they go to jail for a long, long time. That's the only deterrent that I can see that'll actually work. Lock them up. Get them off the streets. I don't care if they're young. Lock them up. If they're old enough to pick up a gun and try and shoot somebody, lock them up. That's kind of what I think. If rangers spot people with guns, they're instructed to follow at a safe distance and call police, said Sam Sachs, a former city park ranger. He worked as a seasonal and full-time park ranger from 2008 to 2016. Under the city commissioner's plan, rangers should get bulletproof vests if they're going to be expected to go to parks after shootings, he said. No gun, but a vest. So you're not going to be able to defend yourself. But if you get shot, in the chest area, you're going to be okay. If it's a shot to your dome, not good. I hope you have good life insurance. We've lobbied for vests since 2012. They don't even have vests. I mean, this is just so absurd. They don't have the resources, tools, or the equipment to do that safely. All right, here's one of the reasons I read this article. Here's the next headline. No substitute for police. Let's let that sink in for just a second. Let's take a moment and think about that. There is no substitute for the police. How many of these situations do I read where whatever professional that is involved, what are they instructed to do? Call 911 and let the police sort it out. That's their job. How hard is this? I don't know. Apparently pretty hard in Portland. TJ Browning, who has worked for 3 decades on police accountability measures, has called park rangers to deal with safety issues at her nearby neighborhood park, Laurelhurst Park, a southeast Portland park that's been a frequent camping spot for homeless people, particularly during the pandemic. We were repeatedly told it was too dangerous for the park rangers and that it was a police matter, said Browning, who also volunteers as an advocate for people who appeal police bureau findings on their complaints against officers. The park rangers know better than you what they are capable of doing, Browning wrote to city commissioners and the mayor on Sunday. While the park rangers have an important role in our city, they are no substitute for a professional, trained police force with guns. And bulletproof badges and bulletproof vests, right? I mean, they've got them both. I mean, we should put those guys out there. I bet you they could actually make the streets safer. I don't know. What am I talking about? I am reimagining and rethinking some crazy talk because otherwise we'd be doing it, right? I don't know. She also criticized the commissioner's plan to tap former Fire Chief Myers, now the city's community safety transition director, to oversee the gun violence response for the city. Our city is unraveling at the seams right now, she said in her email to city officials. We need answers, not theories. All right. That's another good one. I mean, you could almost get that tattooed, right? We need answers, not theories. And that's my whole thing about harping on the reimagining and rethinking. There is a time for that. When you've got something that doesn't work, you need to think about it and figure it out and come up with something else that's going to be better. And hopefully you've reimagined and rethought constructively, like, all right, this isn't working. What's the end goal? What would work? All right, let's get through that thought process and get there. But right now, while they, whomever that is, city leaders, while they're doing that, people are being shot daily, just about, right? I mean, am I missing out on something there? So we need answers, not theories. Couldn't agree more. Barrios said he was reached out to Ruben to try and understand the reasoning behind the park ranger plan and is set to speak with her Tuesday afternoon. It's going to fool the public, he said of the idea. It's just smoke and mirrors. Is it even smoke and mirrors? Because when I hear the term smoke and mirrors, I think that it's something that I might actually believe. I would never believe that a park ranger is actually going to reduce gun violence, because I don't really even think of park rangers as anything more than glorified babysitters with a tiny little bit of authority. They honestly don't have any authority to do anything. You're not going to get in trouble by a park ranger for just about anything. You can do whatever you want in a park. And unless the cops are there, guess what? There's really no authority there. All right, so we beat this one to death. So, and I think most people would agree with me. Whatever's going on in Portland, it's not working. You need a Johnny-on-the-spot plan right now. And the one thing that I think would really help things out is to put some more police officers on the streets. But we're not going to do that because we're going down a different path. And so in the meantime, a lot of innocent people are going to get shot and killed. That sucks. I'm not okay with that. So that's where this whole thing it's like, okay, Portland, what are you doing? Here's a story on the other end of that. Here's some criming that didn't pan out, that the crimers, they got caught. And it has to do with catalytic converters too. Another one of my hot stories. I've had a lot of people ask me, what's a catalytic converter? Because I've covered on a number of podcasts this epidemic of stealing catalytic converters, which have rhodium and a bunch of other metals in there that they get melted down and they're more valuable than gold. And so catalytic converters are a hot thing. And I was made aware of this by one of the YouTubers that I follow, Dave2D. He roasts van life YouTube content makers. He makes fun of them. It's very funny. But one day he woke up 6 a.m. He's on the streets of LA, I think it was, living in his Honda Pilot. I can't remember which Honda it was, but not a very big rig, with his dog. He woke up and what's that sound? And it was a metal on metal sound. And unbeknownst to him, he sat up, looked out the window, and there's a dude, and he starts talking to the dude. What are you doing? The guy runs off with his catalytic converter. Just cut it off while Dave's sleeping in his car. And, the thief takes it, sells it, buys some drugs, shoots himself up. That's just what we're doing in 2021. This story, homeowner pulls gun on accused catalytic converter thieves, thinking they were raccoons. Are those raccoons, those pesky raccoons again? Some raccoons can get really big. They're kind of scary, very territorial. So I'm just going to blast through this one because you guys don't really care about this, but it's a good story and I want to read it. Thank you to those of you who sent it. 3 people are behind bars accused of stealing catalytic converters, but according to the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, authorities weren't called out originally for the theft. The sheriff's office says a neighbor in the Maywood Park area saw a suspicious man with a gun. Turns out that man was a homeowner who accidentally stumbled upon 3 people suspected of stealing the catalytic converter off of his car, which was parked in front of his home on Northeast Skidmore Street. Skidmore Street has a lot of sketchy stuff, does it not? For those of you in Portland, am I mistaken? But Skidmore seems to have, it's just got stuff going on, right? I've been having problems with raccoons, and so I thought it was raccoons, said the homeowner, who asked not to be identified. I grabbed my .22 and went out to see what the noise was, and then I caught 3 people in the act of stealing my catalytic converter. One of them was under the car, and one was, I think, and he was the lookout or something, and then there was a woman who was driving. Got all 3 of them. The homeowner says he was able to keep the 3 people from getting away until police arrived. I don't know. Would I want to corral a bunch of thieves that are probably on some drugs? Guess in Portland on Skidmore Street, that's what you do. I've never pointed a gun at a person before, he said. That was the first time I've ever had to do that, and I hope the last. When police and deputies arrived, the homeowner was detained and then eventually allowed to go back to his home. His firearm was also returned later on. The 3 other people were booked into the detention center. The sheriff's office has identified them, and their charges are as follows. Jamie Elizabeth Saran, 30 years old. Attempted theft. Attempted theft 1, misdemeanor. Possession of heroin. There's the drugs, right? Possession of meth. Possession of oxycodone. All right, we got a trifecta of solid drugs there. And that's why we're stealing the catalytic converter, because we are in the drug business, the drug consumption business, and we need our next fix. Cody James Schwartz, 30, got an attempted theft 1, also a misdemeanor. Cesar Camacho Trujillo, 35, got an attempted theft 1 warrant for theft in the 2nd degree out of Multnomah County, issued a criminal citation. 1 warrant for UUMV, elude reckless driving out of Washington County, booked and held in custody. So basically just busted for other charges that they've got up. These are not good guys. These are not good people. They got criminal records. They're out criming. They are ripping off innocent people's catalytic converters. The homeowner hopes this arrest will help prevent more crimes like this from happening in his neighborhood. I'm glad that I was able to stop it from happening and hope that prevents it from happening to other people. Only unless other people have guns will this stop happening. Because otherwise, this is a free-for-all in converters, catalytic converters. They're going to go hit someone else right after they hit me, I'm sure, the homeowner said. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? But odds are, this guy's right. The Multnomah County Sheriff's Office was not able to say how many reports of stolen catalytic converters they have taken so far this year. The Portland Police Bureau says as of March 11th, it took 94 reports. As of March, the Washington County Sheriff's Office took 37 reports in the last 6 months. Multnomah County District Attorney Mike Schmidt was not available to speak on camera Monday, but has released previous statements about the rise of catalytic converter thefts. We know it's a thing. It's ongoing. It's a happening. So even if your car's parked outside in a decent neighborhood, you got to watch that catalytic converter. They might just saw it right off, sell that bad boy on the catalytic converter secondary market, catalytic converter fencing market. This is just nuts, right? He also testified about a Senate bill that would make it more difficult for shops to buy stolen catalytic converters. This stuff is so crazy. One of the things that I read on a story out of California regarding catalytic converters is that as a preventative measure, if you don't want your catalytic converter stolen, or if you want to really mess with the catalytic converter crooks, have the bolts connecting your catalytic converter welded. Weld those bad boys in place. Makes it way harder for them to take off the catalytic converter. All right. It also makes it more expensive for you to get the catalytic converter off in the event that it fails, right? What happened here? Well, I was worried about my catalytic converter just, somebody magically taking it. So I had them welded shut. Oh, okay. Interesting. The second thing that the article that I read said, scratch the serial number of your car into the catalytic converter. All right. But if they're going to melt this bad boy down for the rare metal inside of it, once that metal is, melted, does it still show the serial number? No, it's just in between when you jack that catalytic converter, maybe to the point where they get it to the fence or whatever, the hot shop. If they get busted, oh, hey, here's the serial number. Let's match it up with the car. This is a crime that's just going to basically just keep going, and it's going to go undetected until there are some major penalties for stealing catalytic converters. Who would have thought? That's just crazy, right? It's the world we live in. Craziness. All right. Both these stories out of Portland, Oregon, P-Town, Portlandia. just got a lot going on. Seattle's got it going on too. San Francisco, LA, lots of other cities, but Portland just consistently bringing the interesting stories because it's kind of a freak show there, right? I mean, downtown Portland, it just is. All right, that's it for me. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for supporting me. Yeah, that's it. I'm just going to go quietly in this one. I'm not going to bother you with all that YouTube stuff of subscribing, blah, 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 blah. All right. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now. I hope you have a great one. Whatever you're doing out there, have some fun, stay safe, and I'll see you soon. Bye. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll know when our next video is out.